Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items. This session is approximately 30 minutes in length, and we'll have about 10 minutes at the end of the session for questions. But if it works better for you, Donna, we can forward the questions as they arrive throughout the presentation as well. So I think we'll do that too. This session is being recorded for later viewing, just so everybody knows. Okay, let's get started. Guidelines are an important piece to nursing practice. They support nurses in understanding and fulfilling their responsibilities and guide them in making safe, confident decisions in their practice. In today's session, SRNA Practice Advisor Donna Marin will discuss two new guideline documents currently in development. The first is a guideline for prescribing medications, and the second, a guideline for RNs recommending and administering non-prescription medication. Over to you, Donna.
Thank you, Terry. I really want to thank everyone for attending today. It's always important for us to have these connections with our workplace reps and our members. So it is a pleasure to be invited here today. I am going to talk a little bit about what's in common about the two documents, and then I'll talk about them each individually. And as Terry said, if you do have questions, please forward them throughout the session and we can deal with them. So these documents are both newly developed documents. Sometimes SRNA undertakes revisions of existing documents, and sometimes they develop them based on needs that are identified. And so that's what these two documents are today. They're newly development documents, and we do have a process that we work through. And so I want to remind people that these documents have not been completed yet. They're still in that development process, but we are getting nearer to finalizing them, and then they will be presented to the ED for their approval and to council, and then hopefully we will roll out an implementation and communication strategy to you later. So the things that are common about these two documents are SRNA has decided that we'd like to strategically present more regulatory focused language at the beginning of our documents, just to kind of situate how they fit into RN practice and to really demonstrate the connections to our standards, our practice standards, and our entry-level competencies. So both of these documents, if you've already had a chance to review them when they were put out for external consultation, or if you plan to review them following this presentation, you'll note that that's one of the changes, and we think it's a really good change and a strong change, and something that will help our members really be able to integrate the content of the document into their own practice. So, as I was mentioning, there is a document development process. We did complete external consultation already and have taken the feedback and looked at it and evaluated where it could best be incorporated into the documents. And now it's being circulated, both of them are being circulated internally again for another review to see what those changes look like. So I really do want to kind of, put in a little reminder for people. We have documents getting developed or revised, on an ongoing basis. That's one of our commitments, is to keep the content current and valid and applicable to your practice. And so if you have opportunities and are interested, the nursing practice updates section of our website will be able to indicate to you which documents are under development at any given time. So you might want to loop back to that section of the website on a regular basis. Some people choose to do that as part of their continuing competence, and one of their learning activities is to kind of constantly be reviewing what those documents look like as they're in development, as well as when they have been completed and rolled out. So those are the things really, I think, that are common. I do want to talk about key points about each of the individual documents. So first we'll talk about the RNs recommending and administering non-prescription medications. And so this is a little bit of a change in language from when we originally put the document out for consultation. We put it out as RNs recommending and administering over-the-counter medications. And so one of our pharmacy groups got together and put together some of their feedback. And I believe that this suggestion came from them. In terms of the language, and non-prescription drugs is actually a more accurate terminology, and so you'll notice that the document, when it is finalized, will be changed. But it is a document that really talks about how RNs would be able to do that. The why behind why would they be able to do that is, for some time we've recognized that there may be opportunities where RNs would be able to improve the access for members of the public or, people that they're caring for, in terms of over-the-counter or non-prescription medications. So, let's think about someone working in a mine site who comes and says to the occupational health nurse, hey, I've got something happening. I feel like I need, to address it so that I can continue to work in my role. So the RN may be able to do a bit of a thorough assessment with that person, talk about, what's happening, what's worked in the past, what health conditions they might have, what other medications that they're taking, and be able to really make a good recommendation to them of a non-prescription drug that they may be able to access. And really one of the key parts of that assessment is being able to identify if in fact you think that there's something more significant that requires a more in-depth assessment by a physician or a nurse practitioner, and making that recommendation. But there are times where somebody simply does need, something that if they were walking down the street and saw a pharmacy, they could just stop in and self-select a medication. But this, really allows people an opportunity to, utilize their nursing knowledge and provide guidance to that member of the public or that employee or whoever. So this one outlines clear expectations for if you are a registered nurse and you are being asked for your professional opinion on non-prescription medications, either recommending those or choosing and selecting or helping someone select one and administering that. So it really outlines the expectations and hopefully does improve access for people. So that's that document. We'll talk a little bit about the guidelines for prescribing medication. So this one, again, you'll notice that regulatory focus, really up front in the document. But it is a guideline that describes the principles of how medication prescribing should happen and be undertaken by authorized members. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about this one because there were some questions when we were doing the external consultation, and certainly it's beneficial for everybody to have it, you know, kind of clearly understood that currently the authorized prescribers that are SRNA members are RNs with additional authorized practice that are able to prescribe certain medications through utilization of the clinical decision tools, or CDTs, and nurse practitioners who are able to prescribe under their own authority. So it's not, this document is not enabling RNs to prescribe. There is a committee that has been struck called the RN Optimization Committee. And so Cindy Smith, our executive director, and Barbara McDonald, a practice advisor, and others from the SRNA are involved in that committee. And we have a wonderful cross-section of people, representation from the public. We're seeking to have patient advisor representation on that committee. There's a whole lot of multidisciplinary experts that have been invited to come together and have discussions on how the SRNA may be able to optimize RN practice. So at some point, that may be one of the recommendations that they make, and then SRNA would look at being able to put regulatory processes in to enable that to happen. But currently, this document only is applying to authorized prescribers, and that's RN AAPs and NPs currently. So the document itself outlines clearly for people, we hope, what a prescription is, what are the requirements for a prescription, what are the processes, what are the best practices, how can that be achieved most safely to achieve the best outcomes for and with the individuals that we are providing care to. It also talks about dispensing. In the RN Act of 1988, registered nurses are authorized to prescribe and dispense medications. And there may be times where, in order to meet the needs of the people that are getting cared for, RNs with additional authorized practice or NPs may end up dispensing medications at the same time that they prescribe it. We recognize clearly that dispensing medications is ultimately probably best served by pharmacists fulfilling those prescriptions and doing their assessments and their teaching and their ongoing support of clients. However, if that can't happen for any number of reasons, and it is necessary for people to be able to obtain those medications to achieve the best health outcomes, there are times where certainly MPs or RNs with additional authorized practice will also dispense medications to people. There's a section in there about NPs prescribing controlled drugs and substances, because that is part of prescribing medication. And so that's clearly addressed in the document as well. And we've addressed drug samples, because there have been some times where recently there were changes to some of the federal regulations regarding drug samples. And so we have nursing practice updates regarding that, and we've included it in this guideline document as well. So I think that probably gives you a good sense of what the documents are like and about. And I'd like to be able to address any questions or comments that have come in. Terry, is there anything you'd like to direct to me?
Just some thanks for the new information and what you've provided has been really clear about, why these documents are sort of coming about now and the process to get here. Is there, and I really appreciate your clarification on the prescribing guideline about it, who it applies to right now. We've kind of left that language a little bit open. And so that's perfect that right now it's NPs and RNs with additional authorized practice through the clinical decision tools.
That's actually a really good point that you raised, Terry, is that when we look to develop documents, we look for a certain amount of longevity, because you don't want to constantly be in and revising guideline documents unnecessarily. And so we have included language that talks about an authorized prescriber, so that if in fact the optimization committee does feel that that's an important role for RNs to play, and they recommend to the SRNA that they enact it and put processes in place to support that, then there will be other ways for us to indicate that RNs now have that authority. But the document itself talks about authorized prescribers, and that could at some point in the near future, hopefully, or distant future, include RNs. And so that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah. And with the RNs recommending non-prescription medications, again, I think that's a good distinction that you've made, where, we've typically referred to them as over-the-counter medications, but according to the drug schedules and those kinds of things, it is non-medications that don't require prescription. And that feedback coming from our pharmacy partners was really very important. And so I'd just like to kind of reiterate Donna's earlier comment about when these documents are out for feedback. It's so helpful, and we need to hear from our members about the different comments that they have in their perspectives. So we do have a comment here. I've noticed over the many years that the scope of pharmacists has increased greatly. With the RNSPs/authorized practice and these documents, RNs are able to provide greater access to care for clients. What do you see for RNs as we go forward? I do not mean to imply that it is all about the RNs increasing what we can do, but greater and more appropriate access for the people of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, that's a really great comment. Certainly, you're right. We have several different categories of members, but registered nurses tend to be in such a broad number of contexts of care throughout the province. And whether you're in a rural area or a remote area or an urban area, there's a population of people that need to get served. And so, when we look to optimize RN practice, as we're doing here, really it is with the intent of opening up that access to care, removing or reducing barriers to care, and really enabling RNs to optimize the scope of practice and hopefully their satisfaction in providing that care.
I think just a comment, just thinking about Barb's presentation yesterday on RN specialty practices, and with the update of that framework, really looking at keeping the client in the center of all care decisions. So what is in the best interest of the client in their environment, and really look at that perspective as we look at access. So yeah, great points.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at 10:30. I know we started late, but I don't see any additional questions. Certainly, if people do have questions afterwards, we can, you can always reach out to an SRNA practice advisor through practiceadvice@srna.org, sending us an email there. and we'd be happy to chat with you, or give the office a call and you'll be directed to the practice advisor on call. Donna, anything else before we wrap up the session today?
No, thank you again, everyone, for attending or for viewing this at a later date if you weren't able to attend the live session. Yeah, lots of exciting things happening at the SRNA. So.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Again, thanks for everybody joining or accessing this afterwards. Have a wonderful day.